buying side, and REEP Residential is our in-house management company. So the good thing with REEP is that we control the entire process from pre-acquisition all the way through to disposition. And so, we've got some key things that we do, but before that, before real estate, what did we do? Well, Jacob my husband had a property management software company that he ran in Dallas, actually Richardson to be more exact. And I was in banking for 20 years. And so after he sold his business in 2007, yeah, get that timing, right before the financial crisis in 2008, we had a little money to invest. And so we were looking for an investment that did not have volatility, because we had just seen some of our friends take, 30-40% hits from the stock market. So we weren't looking for more of that. And what we also wanted was something that we could get some tax benefits from. We just had a big taxable event. And so those were two of the main things we were looking for. And that's how we found real estate. Well, actually, Jacob came to me and said, why don't we buy multifamily property? And I said, oh, hold on a minute. What is a multifamily property? How does it operate? How does it make money? Being a finance person, that was the main thing for me, was to figure that out. Well, fast forward to today, we've purchased 33 different assets in San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, with a dollar value of about $720 million. So it's been a great business for us. And we've partnered along the way with investors and what we call our limited partners. And it truly is a partnership, because without them and without our team, we wouldn't be where we are, and we wouldn't have been able to also share in the rewards with our investors. So today, I'm excited to introduce to you one of our key leaders at our company, Victor Garza. Victor is not related, although I would claim him if he wanted to be claimed as one of our Garzas. And he is our Director of Capital Projects. Victor, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. As Arleen said, I'm Victor Garza, Director of Capital Projects here at REEP Residential. I've been in the industry 24 years. The majority of that I spent on the operations side. I started out as a leasing agent, worked my way up to a regional manager, and then a few years ago moved over to the capital or construction side. I've been here with REEP now 2.5 years. August 2021, I believe, is when I started.
Fantastic. Well, as I mentioned before, we own the properties in San Antonio, Austin, and Houston. And I want to start a little bit by sharing about why Houston. I mean, Victor, that's been your hometown, and you know the market very, very well. And we do rely on Victor and other folks on our team that are in the Houston market or San Antonio or Austin to really feed us the information, even pre-acquisition. What parts of a market are the best to buy in? Because you can have opportunities in any market. But in Houston in particular, that was one where going into the market in 2019, we heard a lot of things. We heard that there's no zoning. You really have to know the market, submarket by submarket. And so we did a lot of digging. And what we found is that when we analyzed the data, Houston had those key elements: job growth, population growth, and the renter statistics. The household income was nice, and the percentage of households that rent exceeded 50%, which is something that we look at. So in a market like, I think Houston proper is over 7 million people, and if 50% of those rent, of those households, you've got a good market there to start with and to work with. So Houston met all of that. And Houston has consistently been highly rated. It's the 4th largest city in the U.S. The average household income is $90,511. So from a renter standpoint, that's good, because it means they can afford our rents. It's got a low unemployment rate of 3.9%, which is below the national average. And a lot of that is because there are a lot of jobs in Houston. So employment has tended to be on the lower end of it. And it is second only to New York City, which is where Dave Cotlier is from, in the number of Fortune 500 companies who call Houston their home for their headquarters. So all of that, led us to over time buy 11 properties in this market. Now, we were very picky. One, we don't buy near the coast for very obvious reasons. One being insurance costs become very, very, very expensive. And two, we didn't want to have to deal with some of the natural disasters that we know can happen near the coast. So that was big. And then we looked at the demographic data, all the projections, and we said, yeah, this is where we want to be. And then we talked to our team, and our team said, this is where you can buy. This is where there's growth. And over 50% of the growth in Houston has tended to be in the submarket, on the outer lying areas of Houston. And so that is, if you look at where REEP owns properties, it's kind of northwest part of Houston, Cypress and, the Willowbrook area, some of the areas that are more on the outer edges of Houston. And so that has really allowed us to build a base in Houston where we can take advantage of economies of scale. So the vendors we use have all been vetted. They've been, utilized by somebody on our team at some point or another. And we get great pricing because they know we have a portfolio that they can potentially be part of in terms of from a vendor standpoint. So that is kind of the background on REEP and how we got to Houston and why we came to Houston to buy. But let's talk a little bit about what the subject is today, and that is renovations. REEP has built its portfolio on value add acquisitions. And so value add can mean a couple of things, but in general, it's the property is underperforming in some way. And it could be that the competitors have gone in and fixed up the units and they're getting a higher rent. And so part of our value add strategy is to go in and beef up the units, make them nicer, add amenities. So because we don't directly compete with the A class, we typically buy B class assets. The amenities are an important thing for people that are coming in to rent. So we try to mimic some of the amenities that are at the A class properties to get a higher rent as we come in. But one of the big things on this is having enough money for the renovations. When we started out almost 13 years ago, we didn't quite have it down to a science. So we typically had enough money to do all the renovations. But if, there was something we decided to change midstream, we didn't always have that luxury to do. But over this period of time, we now know have enough money to complete the renovation, and any deferred maintenance is critical. But you also don't want to have too much money, because if you have too much money, then you're diluting the investment to some degree, or can for investors. So it's a fine-tuned process to get to the right number. And so we start out on the buying side, which is what I oversee, by underwriting a particular renovation number or capital expenditure number. And that comes from us visiting the property, us taking a look at the broker offering memorandum to see how many units have already been renovated, how many need to be renovated. Did the current seller fix the outside? Did they paint it? What did they do? And we typically ask for, and this is important, a capital expenditure summary from the seller. So that tells us where did they put their money? Because if they did a good job, we shouldn't need to go back in and put more money behind their money for those particular items. So we start with that, and then we go to Victor and we say, Victor, this is our first pass at the capital expenditure budget. And then Victor, what do you do at that point?
At that point, I take a look at what we want to do at the property, what we budgeted, and then I'll make sure our numbers are fit the current prices. In the beginning, we've gotten much better. As Arleen said, we've got it down to a science now, but in the beginning, it was, we may have wanted a playground, but we budgeted enough money for a playground that would be in someone's backyard, not a commercial piece. So we've gotten to the point now that once I get that budget, it's pretty in line with the cost that we're seeing. So I just verify that, make sure that there aren't going to be any surprises around the corner, and hand it back to the buy team and say, this is a good budget.
Okay, and then comes the next step, and that is due diligence. So due diligence is when we're already under contract, we're given permission from the seller to go in and really dig deep. We will walk into every single unit, open cabinets, turn on faucets, push on the toilets. We're checking everything there. And so tell us what you're doing on due diligence when we're on the properties.
So on due diligence, I bring out several different vendors. I bring out electricians, plumbers, roofers, landscapers, any trade that I think we're going to need. I like to bring them out. I'll bring out 2 or 3 in each of those trades so that I can get a good bid from them when it comes to time to make these repairs once we bought the property. I usually go through with each one and say, hey, we're going to do a new roof, or we need a tree trim, and we want to really beef up the curb appeal. And so I'll get those bids while we walk that day. This due diligence day is also a great time to find anything that we may have missed on that initial pass. We can go through and say, okay, we weren't expecting to paint this property, but now we need to. So we need to look at our budget again. Do we have enough money in contingency to cover that, or do we need to increase that budget? I always want more money, but there have been times that we've gone onto a due diligence and I've said, you know what, we budgeted to do this project. It doesn't need to be done because the seller did a great job, or we thought it needed to be done, but now that I've seen it, we don't really need to. So sometimes we will scale that budget back as well. Once due diligence is done, I give the vendors 7 to 10 days to get me their prices in. And then I start refining which vendor we're going to select, because I want to start preparing for the day we actually close. I like to have several projects going, day 1, day 2, of us actually owning the property. So this is the time that I get all those bids in, I streamline them, and then I'll pass them on to the buy team and say, these are the bids I think we should go with. And then we'll sit down and discuss if we have any questions. If not, then we're just waiting. From that point, I'm waiting to close on the deal so that we can get moving on the renovations.
Great. So you're verifying that the number we gave you is actually going to work.
Correct.
With actual bids.
With
from
actual
vendors.
bids, yes.
So we're not guessing, and we're not saying that after closing, oh, well, this bid came in, 20,000 higher than we budgeted. We know when we complete the due diligence process, what will be covered by the budget that we have.
Correct.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the structural elements of the due diligence. What vendors are you bringing in to look at the big things?
General contractors for sure. I
Okay.
bring in plumbers, electricians, landscapers. If we've got, we ran into a system when we bought a property that had a lift station. We've never worked with a lift station before, so I brought in a company specific to lift stations just to make sure that it was in good shape. If not, get a bid for what they think it's going to cost to make that repair down the line. If it's a mid-rise or a high-rise, I bring in elevator companies, because we want to make sure that those elevators are expensive. That's a cost that you don't want to miss, because elevators get very expensive. So all the major trades, we want to get at least 2 different companies to look at that so that I can get bids to compare and then refine from there.
So Victor, if the seller tells us, hey, we put on this roof 4 years ago, do we just go on their word, or how are you verifying that?
I'll have at least two roofers get up on every roof of the property that we buy, and then I'll get their opinions. I like to get two, sometimes I'll get three, that way I can compare, make sure that if I just got one guy and he says I need to replace all the roofs, maybe I do, maybe I don't.
You're not sure if he just needs to do work,
Yes.
right?
So if I get two or three and they all say, hey, these roofs are bad, or I like it actually if I get, we're talking roofs, so if I get somebody on the roof and they say, oh, these roofs are pretty good, you know, we might want to do repairs on these numbers. I like that because then I can then look at the two or three bids and see if they all say that. And then sometimes you'll have the ones that say, nope, they all need to be replaced, but then I got two others that say, no, we can do repairs. So I know now that third vendor that said we need to replace them all, that's somebody maybe I don't use going forward, or it's somebody that I have to keep an eye on going forward.
Right. So you lose a little trust with them
Just a little
because
bit,
you had two other people tell you you don't need new roofs, and this one guy's saying you need roofs.
Correct.
So tell me about foundations. What are you doing in terms of checking out the foundation?
I bring in a foundation company and I'll have them, we try to get into at least 50% of the buildings. We'll take measurements to make sure there aren't any deflections on has the building dropped or has it not. A good way to see that when we do our initial unit walks, you can see cracks in the sheetrock or doors that aren't closing. So that lets me know, hey, we've got some issues. So I'll make sure to get the foundation companies into the building where we're seeing those kind of deficiencies.
Okay, fantastic. You talked about a plumber. So what are the plumbers doing on that initial inspection?
I have the plumbers walking the exterior fixtures. We're looking for anything that might be corroded or missing. You'd be surprised at how many buildings don't have building shutoffs. And doesn't sound like a big deal now, but if you've got a break in the line, you've got to shut the whole property down, that becomes an issue for the residents, which becomes an issue for the staff that's running the property. So we're looking for, if we don't have shutoffs, I want to get a bid to what's going to cost me to put shutoffs on other buildings. If there's boilers, I want them checking the boilers for me. I need to know how old they are. I need to know if they've had any kind of repairs recently. Because again, like elevators, boilers can get expensive. So we want to make sure that we're covering those costs. I have them walk inside the units, checking all the fixtures underneath the cabinets. We just want to make sure that we've got no surprises, especially if I get a look at the expenses and see that they've done a lot of plumbing repairs. Then I need to know, okay, you did all these repairs. There has to be a reason, and I need to make sure that we've budgeted for that.
So that's a key thing. You know, on the underwriting side, we're looking at the financial statements from the seller to underwrite income and expenses to see how we can run it better in the future and therefore add that value to that property. But what Victor just shared is he's looking at those financials from the standpoint of what are they currently spending money on? If there are a lot of plumbing expenditures, it tells you there's some issues. And so we want to ask all the right questions to the seller. What repairs have you done? Why did you do those repairs? Are there any ongoing issues? And then you're going to verify it sometimes with cameras. So tell us about that.
Correct. I have the plumbers. We're going to do at least 2 lines on the property, the 2 main lines, front and back. Typically, I'll do 3 or 4 lines just to make sure that everything. We'll run a camera down that sewer line to see if we find any bellies or breaks. Because again, just because we haven't seen that they've spent money on this doesn't mean that sewer is functioning properly. Maybe they just knew they were getting ready to sell and they didn't want to spend this money. So we'll run some cameras in there just to make sure that everything is running the way it should. And if it's not, I'll get bids to make those repairs prior to us closing on the property.
Because those are the things that are going to cost us a lot of money if we don't catch them. And, you know, from a negotiating standpoint, if Victor comes back and tells me the roofs are shot, we've got sewer lines that have bellies. In other words, the pipe itself has got a little belly where there's a deficiency in that pipe. Then it becomes a question of, do we want to negotiate the price down for these items? And you typically don't want to, what they call in our business, retrade someone on something that was obvious when you toured the property. But that's why we're doing due diligence, because if we find something that is significant, then we want to go back to the seller and say, well, can you fix it before closing? Or how can we arrive at a solution? Because we now have, 50% of the roofs that have to be replaced. And unfortunately, at one time I was called the roof lady, because I would go back to the sellers and really ask them to meet me somewhere in the, maybe not even in the middle, maybe all the way, if the roofs had, according to our roof expert, hail damage or wind damage that had occurred during their period of ownership. So they were aware of it. Maybe they didn't file a claim, or maybe they filed the claim and kept the money. So these are the things that we have to become detectives to really figure out.
And speaking on roofs again, we have purchased a property where they said, no, we did these 4 buildings, brand new roofs. They're all good. And then I got a couple of roofers up there and they said, oh yeah, they put new shingles on, but they didn't tear off the old shingles. They didn't replace the decking. So these roofs, while they got new shingles on them, they're not going to last very long. So those are the things that we're trying to find during due diligence.
Correct. And on the electrical end, we're looking for particular breakers. Tell us a little bit about what we don't want to buy in terms of breakers, because there'll be issues.
We don't want, we call them stab lock breakers. They're breakers that just kind of plug in. And the very popular in the 70s, early 80s. And a lot of the deals that we buy are falling in that 80s category. So we just want to make sure that at some point those breakers have already been updated. And those breaker boxes have been updated. And if they haven't, then we want to talk about the cost, if we're going to retrade on that or not. But I also have them looking for aluminum wire. All these 80s deals can become costly if you don't catch the stab lock breakers or the aluminum wires, because when inspectors come in to do a habitability, they can tell us, hey, you've got to bring this up to code. And if we didn't know that that was going to be an issue, then we're in a little bit of trouble, because it's going to get expensive. So yes, we're definitely looking, we're checking the breaker boxes, and we'll pull a few wall plates off just to see how they're wired.
Great. Well, and the other thing I want to share, and you probably all know this, but once we finish our inspection, the lender is going to come through with their engineering company and do a second inspection. And in that inspection, if they find things, there are certain things that they are going to make sure we fix. For example, anything that's considered a life safety issue. It could be something as simple as there are cracks or areas in the sidewalk that are lifted that could cause a tripping hazard. So it's a liability for us and for our partner, the bank or the lender, because they're going to be lending us money on this. So they will go through, do this engineering study, and then they come back to us with their findings. And at that point, we go back to Victor and we say, well, they said there were this number of trip hazards. So you may go back out there and just verify that that's the case, or we ask them for pictures and location. Where are those, that you found? And then there's in some cases where we get bids to fix them. And then we tell the lender, you're saying it's going to cost us $30,000 to fix them. Here's our bid for $10,000. And so we don't have to bring that money to the table, or as much money to the table to do that. And that lender report will also look at the breakers. If the breakers are the wrong kind of breakers, they're going to make us replace them. And that can be a $2,500 to $3,000 per breaker repair. So we have to catch those on the front end so that we can be honest with the seller and say, we've got some expensive things here that are going to require some money. Let's figure out how that gets paid.
And typically when I do on due diligence, when I bring the GCs out, I have them give me a bid to do parking lot repairs, sidewalk grinds or repairs, place carpentry, wrought iron repairs. So a lot of times the things that the lender comes back and says, we need these fixed, I've already got that included in our capital budget. So it's it's good to see what they find, but typically I've already found it, or the contractors have already found it.
Yeah, and so then what we tell the lender is already included in our budget, so they don't charge us extra dollars at closing to fix those things because we've already got it in our plan. So it works so seamlessly and so well to have Victor and his team go out and do that. I want you to talk a little bit about, it's a little off topic, but I think it's important for some of these repairs. We have what's called a hit squad. And really the hit squad for REEP, they are employees of REEP, and they actually come in and do bigger projects. So tell us a little bit about how we use the hit squad to save money.
The hit squad, it's a 6-man team, and they're basically GCs. I'll use them for anything that does not need a permit. If we need a permit, then I want to hire a GC so that their license is on the line versus us.
Sure.
So they'll come in if I've got a underground water leak, and they'll come jackhammer the concrete. They'll dig down, find the pipe, cut it out, make the replacement. I've used them. Sometimes we'll have carpentry that needs to be done. They'll come in and put in new hardy panels on the buildings. Anything. If a contractor can do it, these guys can do it. And then it saves us money because they're on our payroll. It's not, when I'm not paying a third-party company to come in and do it.
I think that's fantastic. We had a recent example to share with everyone where we had sprinklers go off in one of our mid-rise units. It damaged just sheetrock primarily in 2 units, and then the leasing office below it also had damage. So tell us a little bit about how that project worked compared to what we would have paid if the hit squad had not been around.
So I got bids to make that repair just to the leasing office, not even to the 2 units that took water as well. And those prices came in at about $90,000 to make that repair. When it's all said and done, the hit squad came in. They were able to cut out sheetrock, dry out the wet studs and everything that were in the walls, put the sheetrock back on, paint. We put new light fixtures in because the fixtures we had were damaged. And material, off the top of my head, I want to say was $20,000, and then we paid them their normal salary. So we saved a good $60,000 there.
Great. And we have other examples of that. We had the hit squad in the past put a fence up where the bid to fence the whole property, wrought iron with stone columns, came in at 150,000, and the hit squad did it for 50,000. So we saved the property and our investors about $100,000 on that project also. So that is why it makes sense to have this specialized team, our internal construction team, to be able to handle all of these various repairs that, as you said, don't require a permit, but they are beyond our maintenance guys, taking them off the property to do it. So our hit squad comes in and does that. So that's all fantastic. A lot of that involves the exterior. You are in charge of unit renovations. So that means when we go into the inside of the units, beforehand, we decide, are we doing granite? Are we painting, light fixtures, cabinets, all of that? So walk us through how unit renovations are done by you in partnership with the property team.
Once we'll do a few test units. We have an idea. The day we close, we have an idea of what we want to do in there. So maybe we want to try a brownish, tannish granite. Maybe we want to try one with, it's mainly white. We're playing with quartz right now at 610. So there's a few different test units we'll do so that we can find the right fit for us. That involves new paint. Sometimes a lot of these properties you'll walk in, the kitchen has an opening that you can see from the kitchen to the living room.
Where there's a cabinet above it?
Cabinet above it, countertop below. So we are now removing that cabinet if it makes sense. If it's a 1 bedroom and they've got plenty of other cabinets, it makes sense to move that, lower that countertop. So now you've got a really open feeling there. 610, we're able to do that in the 2 bedrooms as well, because there was plenty of cabinet space in there. So we'll go in, we'll demo those out, do the sheetrock, we're really transforming that unit. A lot of times we're getting rid of the carpet altogether and just going in with a vinyl, simulated wood pattern vinyl. Sometimes we'll keep that depending on what the subfloor looks like. We'll keep the carpet in the bedroom and the living room, do the vinyl everywhere else. We're doing new shaker doors just about everywhere. The shaker door, if you're not familiar, it's just got a little kind of like a square that pops out, so it gives it a more modern feel. Typically, we're doing new hardware on the doors, handles and pulls. Depends on what the market supports. We'll do stainless steel. For sure, we're going to do black appliances if we don't do stainless steel. New blinds usually.
Mhm.
So it just transform the unit. I think we have some pictures later that we can see what one looked like
Great.
and what it ends up.
And there are a couple things we're looking at, Victor, when we're doing the units. One, we want to put things in there that minimize our turn costs. So when one resident moves out and we're trying to get the unit ready for the next one, granite saves us because we're not resurfacing countertops. The vinyl floor, the faux wood floor, as we market it, helps us because if there is damage, we can generally replace that section and not have to put in a totally new floor. So we're considering that when we're putting together our renovation plan. But then the other piece that we're considering is how much rent are we going to be able to drive or increase by doing this? And so Victor mentioned 610. We bought, it was originally called Park 610 in Houston, right by the Houston Medical Center, MD Anderson, the largest health complex in the world. And in that area, what we knew was that we are the only Class B property. Everything around us was Class A. So we could provide, even if we increased our rents, we could provide the most affordable bang for your buck at Park 610. So we put together what the unit renovations were going to look like. We did it, we tested it, and what we figured out is that we had originally put into our underwriting $125 rent increase. And I think now we're closer to 200.
We're right at that 200 threshold, yes.
So we've beaten our pro forma underwrite on rent increase by selecting the things that people will pay for, that add value, that allows them to have a nicer unit. And we use things like a touchless water faucet.
Yes.
And you would think, well, that sounds simple. It's not too much more than a regular faucet, but our leasing agents are able to walk in, run their hands under that faucet, water turns on, they run it under again, water turns off. So we're also conserving. In the units, the closets, when you walk in, have a motion detector. So the light comes on when people walk in and it turns off when they walk out. Again, conserving energy. And we're doing things like smart technology in units. I don't think we're doing it at Park 610.
No, not at 610.
But we have at others where they have a smart thermostat, they have smart locks, and we're able to charge for these extra items that people like, including package lockers.
Yep.
Right? How many properties have you done with package lockers?
Nearly all of them. And anytime we buy one, package lockers to me make sense because then you don't have the Amazons or the FedEx or UPS sitting at people's doors. And, even with the Ring camera, if somebody wants to come by and take that package, they're going to take it.
Yeah.
Package locker makes more sense, centrally located. Residents get a text when their package arrives, and then they go pick it up at their convenience. It's in a locker. Only their code will open it. So
Great. Well, so we are looking for those amenities, the things that the Class A properties all have package lockers. So it doesn't cost us a lot to put it in. And then we can charge an amenity fee to the residents for the convenience of picking up their package from the locker anytime, 24/7. So these are some of the things we figured out. I want to talk a little bit about the REEP day one difference. Tell us about the REEP day one difference. What's happening there?
I've been in the industry for a minute, so I've worked at a few other companies, and I have to say that we do day one better than anybody. Typically, we don't start, other companies aren't starting to deploy their funds for 2, 3, sometimes a month after they bought it. Once we decide on a contractor and we decide this is the bid that we like, I start lining them up for day one. So as soon as we close, if we close at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday, I have vendors there at 8 a.m. Wednesday morning. Typically tree trim, landscapers, because that we can get that done anytime. The marketing team is great. We always have our new signs, our new designs ready to go, so that first day we're putting up signs. If we're changing the name, the new name is up. If we're keeping the name, we're just going with some new signs. Those signs are already going up. So the first day, I try to have somebody there power washing. Everybody knows, oh, something's happening here, and it gets the residents excited. I can't tell you how many times I've walked a property and a resident will come up to me and say, "Hey, you guys have owned this thing for 2 weeks and you've done more than the seller ever did. I've been here 5 years or 10 years or however long the case is." So on day one, we're showing the residents that, okay, we're the new owner and we're here to take care of you. And that also helps with the leasing, because people
Right.
driving by are saying, "Oh, what's happening over here?"
Right.
And so it just generates that excitement.
That's fantastic. So we call that the REEP day one difference. And as Victor said, the day we show up after closing, sometimes we're right there waiting for closing. The sign company is there ready to put up signs. All of our brochures have been produced
Correct.
and are ready to be put in the leasing office. Our employees have been hired at least 2 weeks before and trained at another property if we didn't keep the people at the property already. And they all have their shirts, and more importantly, the software is ready to go. Can you imagine running a business without software for 2 to 3 weeks? That doesn't happen here because we plan for weeks and weeks in advance of closing. The residential team and the equity team are meeting, checking off items on a checklist to make sure that the day we close, we are ready to start that renovation plan, executing the plan so that we can start maximizing the value of that property.
We start meeting 4 or 5 weeks prior to close.
Yeah. So I think we've hit a lot of the highlights, the things that we wanted to convey to everyone about how we handle pre-acquisition renovation budgets, the actual, we're at due diligence, what are we doing there? After that happens, what are we doing once the property closes? So I think we covered the full amount, and so, or the full gamut. There's not all the details, but I think we have some pictures to show you of Park 610, which is now been rebranded at 610 at Medical, or at Med Center. So you can see right there to the left is what it looked like prior to our acquisition. To the right is the new sign. Now that one, the new landscaping hasn't gone in because we didn't want the sign company trampling it. But you can see how the branding for 610 at Med Center, not only the name, but the signage itself looks more modern, looks more appealing to that demographic that lives in that area. And then tell us about this, Victor.
So huge difference here. The seller had painted this blue color that we actually liked, so we decided to keep that. But we really wanted to modernize the buildings and get rid of that brick, that orangish brown brick look. So we went with a soft gray, and then on the patio fronts and on any siding that is on the side of the building, we did in a darker gray, and then we just really touched that blue up again so that everything is fresh.
So if you look at if we look at the before picture, that looks like an 80s property. If you look at the picture next to it, it looks much more updated. It could pass for a 90s property. But because again, we know that all the other properties near us were Class A properties, we felt the need to really bring the look and feel of that property more to a modern age. And I think you did it, Victor, with that paint scheme. It looks fantastic. You want to tell us about this area?
So right now, the one on the before pictures is what it looks like now. And I've got a new outdoor kitchen. We're rebuilding that pergola. I'm putting in some egg chair swings. I built a cabana out there. We don't have those after pictures just yet, but they're just about done. I'm doing some astroturf in the pool area so that we get a little more deck space that people can lounge on.
And
So-
no grass in the water.
No grass in the water, yes.
Yeah, so again, those amenities, people, when they come to the property, are looking for those amenities. And if you make them look nice, then they're more willing to rent at your property than others.
These are the interiors. You can see what they look like before, just a plain kind of Formica countertop. And we, on the after photo, went in, we put in a new mirror with that frame around it, changed the lighting. That's the granite Tiger's Eye countertop there. And then we did a tuxedo. I think we have a kitchen photo. If we do, you'll see the tuxedo. We did a dark gray at the bottom and then white at the top.
There's the
There
kitchen.
we go. So as you see here in the before photo, you've got that pass through where you look out. And we have taken those cabinets down and we've lowered that kind of standing bar top so that it's all one level and put in a new light fixture there. You can see the hands-free faucet in the background and then the new flooring.
And one of the things you can't quite see there is the stove. So one of the things we do is the glass top stoves. And the reason we do those, one, it's more modern and it really attracts people. But the other reason is because when somebody moves out, we're not having to change out the elements, you know, that round thing that heats up. Because in a typical property or apartment, you got to change those out every time somebody moves out. So we're saving money in the long run and we're giving residents a much nicer look and feel to their kitchen. And that is the end of the pretty pictures. Victor, great job on 610 at Med Center. It is already doing very, very well, and we've owned it since November. So think about that. We bought it into November, we closed, and the buildings are already all painted. And so it's phenomenal. As you said, it lets the residents know we're serious about giving them a great place to live.
Yep,
So
I'm
now-
actually punching that paint job on Monday.
Are you?
So we will be 100% done on the exterior with, minor punch items.
Fantastic. So let's now go to questions. I'd forgotten about those pictures. So let's see what questions you have that we can answer. Let's see here. I've heard from some other real estate firms, this is the question, that the profit from value add renovations is becoming more narrow and feel ground up construction now makes more sense. What is your opinion and how do you control vacancy if you're planning to do interior renovations? So I'll take that question first. So it depends on your renovation. So what we do at REEP tends to be between 3,500 to call it 7,000 per unit on the high side. And so the ROI on that, when you look at our rent increases, is still there. And that's what we are looking at. Ground up construction, we are just now starting a project, so I can't quite tell you about that. But I will say that costs have gone up in ground up construction too. And the big issue with ground up right now is interest rates. So for now, in our mind, these renovations make sense. We've learned to do them in a very cost-effective way where the ROI is there. How do we control vacancy? Well, we know from the rent roll, which lists every unit and every lease, when those leases are coming due. So what we look at is the leases that are coming due that are at the lowest rent. And we try to target those. As those move out, we'll give that resident a rent increase. They usually choose not to stay or move to a unit that's renovated. And so then we have units. It's a balance. We like to not have occupancy drop too much. So it's staged. As we know those leases are coming due, we're also planning to do the interior renovations. Those take a little longer, generally 12 to 18 months, just because we are waiting for people to move out to do those units. How are you able to control debt financing with interest rates being much higher today than they were 2 years ago? Well, we have a great relationship with our lender. Our last 27 loans were done with Jones Lang LaSalle. And so we are considered a preferred borrower with them. And that means that we are able to get much better terms, including much better interest rates. For example, the loan we got on Part 610, now 610 at Med Center, was a Tier 3 loan. So the terms are very, very good for that loan. And we will also buy down the rate if it makes sense. And so we've gotten, sub-6 rates. I think the last one was at a 5.8 or so. And so we were able to get those done. We also look at the prepay and all of that, but we factor all those terms together in negotiating how much of a rate to buy down. Okay. Here's a question from Lance. Since insurance premiums and property taxes continue to soar, how are you controlling these costs? On the property tax side, we protest the taxes on every single property. We file that protest in May of every year. And then we hire a 2-pack. We hire Ryan, who is our property tax consultants, and they then, with our attorney who gives us a flat rate, will file litigation if we don't get the property taxes reduced. And so that helps us. The only challenge with that is there's a lag. We file that protest, we file the lawsuit, and it's typically not until the following March or April that we get the relief, but we've always gotten money back for that. And so that's there. On the insurance side, last year was a tough year for everyone. So what we decided to do is our asset manager and I took a trip to London to meet with Lloyd's of London and those syndicators. And we presented the REEP story. The fact that we haven't had claims because we have our hit squad. They came in even into play on our insurance, and because of the way we run our properties. It was interesting. They named those winter storms. I don't know if you guys knew that winter storm we had 2 years ago was called Uri by the insurance community. So they asked us, how did you do during Uri? We said we had no claims. We had 8 to 10 minor pipe breaks that our maintenance team was able to fix within an hour of them occurring. And so those are the things that insurance companies want to know, because they know you are mitigating risk and you're trying to minimize their claims. So we'll wait and see, but we're renewing in April. So we have a good feeling because these underwriters thanked us for going. They told us that we are no longer a name on a page. They now know REEP and who we are. And so we are really very hopeful for that. Now, we also do underwrite increases every year on our expenses. So just know that we are accounting for some of that there. Let's see. That's it? Okay, well, it looks like we have covered all the questions. I will have a standing invitation to you if you have other questions. Thank you, Dave, for letting us know it was a good presentation. If you have other questions you think of after the fact, reach out to us at invest@reepequity.com. That's INVEST, invest at reepequity.com. And our fantastic investor relations team, headed up by Rebecca Trainer, will be happy to answer any and all questions you have. Thank you for joining us today. I really hope that it was of benefit to you. on how we run our renovations and how we add value to the property. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you,
Victor.
guys. Thank you.